Hello and welcome to Can We Have Your Attention, the podcast all about the attention economy. I'm James Wickham. Claire Coady is here with me as always, the founder of the Attention Practice. Claire, let's start with a slight apology. We weren't here at the right time last week. That was my fault. Mostly my fault from 9 months ago.
First of all, hello, James.
Hello. Sorry for not being here. And also, there was a very cute reason.
Do you want to disclose the cute reason?
Yes, I had a small child who arrived slightly unexpectedly early, which was lovely. But yes, it's been a beautiful and wonderful couple of weeks with very little sleep, but it's been delightful. So there you go. That's why. And so this is the first thing that I have done as a piece of work following his arrival. So it feels like an important moment.
It is. So first of all, congratulations, James.
Thank you very much.
That is just you and your partner. It's absolutely wonderful. And I've seen pictures. The baby is very, very scrumptious.
Well, he looks quite a lot like me. And so I can only imagine that's the no, I don't think that's the reason at all. They do say, don't they, at the start babies look like their fathers for bonding reasons. And then after that, sensibly revert to what the mum looks like. So I think let's see where we're up to in that journey.
He's very cute. He's very, very cute. But also, I want to stress for our listeners that I did not suggest that James come back early at all.
No, you didn't. No, this was me trying to find some semblance and normality. Because at the moment, I am mostly doing night shifts. My biggest issue, to be honest with you, Claire, is that I have made a terrible error in timing because there's currently no Ashes on overnight. There's no NFL to watch. Baseball might be the best option. I might have to subscribe. But anyway, let's take a break from all that and talk about Kit Kats.
Let's get into it.
Did you notice the pun?
I did notice the pun, and I can't believe I didn't pick it up. Do you want to do that
Thank
again?
you. No, I don't want to do it again. So look, what we're going to do is talk about when brands go viral today and what that means, both in terms of the marketing sense and in terms of the journalistic sense. So why don't you start?
I have worked in the past on Nestle, with their headquarters in Switzerland. I've also worked on another brand that we'll talk about later on, McDonald's in the UK, and I'm from where McDonald's is headquartered as well. So have a little bit of insight into that. And then we're also going to talk about Nutella.
And why in specifically are we talking about Kit Kat?
This is all because of this big robbery. So a couple of weeks ago, 12 tons of Kit Kat were stolen from a shipment outside of Turin. The Kit Kats were heading from Italy to Poland. And interestingly, they were part of a long-trailed collaboration between Kit Kat, which is owned by Nestle, and Formula One. So they were in the shape of Formula One race cars. The brand had been, showing what the design would look like on their social media. And Formula One, of course, it's not just race cars. It is probably one of the world's biggest entertainment franchises now.
Yeah.
Definitely up there with the NFL. Massive brand rights, and that's only grown in the last year, not just between Drive to Survive, but F1, the movie. Yep. So this is in hot demand.
Yeah, and of course, at this point, we're just heading into the European season of Formula One. So they've done some races in Asia. In fact, not as many races as usually they would have done because of what's going on in the Middle East. So the Saudi Arabian and the Bahrain Grand Prix got cancelled this year. But now they're going to head into Europe. Off the top of my head, I think the first one is Italy, which is due in about 4 weeks' time from when we record this. Although, again, my sense of timing at this point is all over the place. So, it may be 3 weeks. So, it's obviously a big moment, and it was a big moment for Kit Kat. But what does this have to tell us about marketing and virality and all of those things?
So I think there's a couple of things that are really surprising about this. So one is that Kit Kat seems to be taken aback by the response. So if you look at the way that Kit Kat originally talked about the heist, the way that they dealt with it, you could almost see internally a split between what I guess would be their brand and product marketing teams and their teams that work on product safety and supply chains and crisis communications. They treated it as a product safety crisis, which it is, right? That's exactly what it is. The Italian police believe that organized crime was involved in the theft, but also they seem pretty taken aback by the fact that other brands, when they jumped on board, everything was about Kit Kat. You wouldn't even have been able to really tell that it was a bunch of limited edition Formula One Kit Kats that were stolen. It was just Kit Kat captured everyone's imagination. This idea of so many Kit Kats being stolen capture their imagination. And you can sort of see internally why they would be surprised by that, because they probably paid F1 quite a lot of money to do this.
The money involved must be absolutely huge for the kind of sponsorship.
And they'll have been working on it probably more than a year. If you told me they've been working on it for 18 months or 2 years, I'd believe you. Everything will have been focused on getting F1's permissions and approvals for the shape and design, for the marketing, for the planning. This would have been in months and months and months of development, especially from the communications point of view. And then to have that much product go missing in your supply chain is just incredible. So everything gets activated. But they're clearly taken aback by, one, how much this is just about Kit Kat and how much people love it. Two, how much goodwill it builds. And then three, how do you handle it? Because it is a product safety issue. You can't join in the fun because people might get hurt.
Yeah. Is it a good thing or a bad thing from a marketing point of view that all of this stuff was stolen? Because it's made it into the news as a result, rather than it just being a marketing exercise.
It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing. So it's all fun and games when you're watching it unfold on Twitter, right? But when you're dealing with a product that's been stolen and it's going into the supply chain, you don't know what's going to happen to it. You've lost control of that product. And if people get hurt, it's not going to be the criminal's fault or whoever sold it. It's not going to be their fault. It'll be your brand's fault. They take it really, really seriously. Any large brand takes this incredibly seriously, but Nestle in particular take this very, very, very seriously for a variety of reasons. One, I think for historic reasons, they are a company that has suffered for not necessarily taking care of their customers and consumers in the past, right? So, thinking particularly the 1980s, when I was working on Nestle, every time I told someone I was working on Nestle, they'd suck in their breath.
I was going to say that sound.
I'd be like, tell me why you're doing that, because like I knew why they were. My degree is in politics and I specialize in development and security. And, everyone knows that if you work in development. But actually, Nestle really learned from that. They worked really hard. And at the core of their business model is protecting people's health and wellness. This is a disaster for them, right? If anything goes wrong, if one thing goes wrong, that's the end of story. So no matter how much fun people are having on X or Instagram or YouTube with this, in their minds, they've lost control of their product. They don't know where it's gone. They don't want a single person to get hurt. And tracking that down is their utmost priority.
So the reputational damage then potentially outweighs the so-called benefits of marketing and the extra kind of visibility that this has brought to it. So what happens next? So
it's interesting because immediately there were people jumping on it saying Kit Kat had planned this. So one was making sure that people know that they didn't plan this, that this is serious and that they're trying to rectify that. Two is when you're a brand of that size, this isn't free advertising. This is advertising that's been paid for with decades and decades of marketing and advertising investment and understanding your product. You don't get this for free. And we'll also come on to that with Nutella as well, because I've seen so many people talking about this as free advertising for Nutella. It's not. And then finally, the last thing is getting fixated on news cycles and how excited people are today can easily lead you away from thinking seriously about what it means for the brand. People's reaction is a reflection of how strong the brand is and how much goodwill it's built up as a result. It is not a reflection of the news cycle, right? But you only do that by protecting your brand. And so I think the reaction has just been incredible in a wholly positive way. There's nothing I'd change about it. The fact that other brands are so excited to jump on the bandwagon of this and use it for their own brand just speaks to how strong Kit Kat's own brand is.
Do you think a lot of that is down to the fact it's Kit Kat specifically? And if this was, to pick up something else, if this was flakes being stolen in the shape of Formula One cars, the reaction would be the same though, wouldn't it? Because do people not have the same kind of reaction to chocolate as the sweet, as the joy, rather than the individual brand of Kit Kat?
So that's interesting. I think there's only a couple of brands that could get away with it. I think the same reaction would happen if a truckload of Dairy Milks in that shape got stolen, or a truckload of, I don't know, a Cream Egg collaboration, or Reese's.
The brand that sticks out to me at the moment as trying to be different is Tony's Chocolonely, right? It's a kind of...
You wouldn't get anything like this.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So why wouldn't you get anything like that? Because it's not in the same public consciousness?
Not in the same public consciousness. So you don't have, it's not as well known. Part of this is that like everyone on the planet knows what Kit Kat is, right? Like the reason that we have these collaborations is actually because of Japan when we think about it. So if anyone doesn't know, I think the famous thing about Kit Kat in Japan is they have, I don't know, there are 32 flavors or something more probably now. But actually, Kit Kat, their marketing and brand strategy in Japan then informed the rest of the world with partnerships and collaborations and that kind of thing. But that's a testament to the reach of Kit Kat and how well developed it's been over time and its market entry. So there isn't a person on the planet that doesn't know what a Kit Kat is. Or, there might be three, but there's far more people who know what Kit Kat is than there are Tony's Chocolonely.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. And if anyone from Tony's Chocolonely would like to improve their brand outreach, I do know a podcast that would be very interested in taking lots of samples.
We take partnerships and sponsorships and chocolate.
Or just chocolate. Basically bribes at this point. But only for chocolate.
It's not bribery.
It's not, no. It's sampling. It's a very different thing entirely. What happens next?
I think if I was in charge of the Kit Kat brand, if I was Kit Kat's global brand manager, I'd be looking at the reaction to this and thinking about actually the value of our own brand again, right? Because that partnership, the way that they licensed, that license agreement with F1 was perfect. Like nothing better than that, right? But I'd also be thinking about how do you demonstrate to other partners that, there's so much value built into your brand that it's actually worth doing the partnership. I mean, I'm assuming they paid F1 for this partnership, but
I would assume so.
Was it mutually beneficial?
Do you, just from a news point of view then, do you think you would try to employ some sort of media strategy as part of this then or would you simply react to what's happened now, or would you have a wider media strategy planned for what you want to do next with the brand?
It's almost impossible to do that. I think what they're hoping for is that nothing bad happens. So you go back to the calendar you plan. Because actually, if you look at preparation they'd done for the release of the F1 collaboration, they clearly had a really, really, really solid content marketing plan behind it. They had a solid PR and communication strategy, probably done in conjunction with Formula One. Nestle's marketing and brand advertising is just buttoned down. Like it's so good. I've worked on Coffee Mate before, in particular, and in the United States for a long time, they had a collaboration with Star Wars. Perfect.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
They are product marketing collaboration 101. If you ever want to learn about it, look at what Nestle does with that. So you'd probably just want to go back to activating that plan as soon as possible because it's really tied into your distribution strategy. It's tied into the sales and it's tied into the rest of the seasonal calendar. You don't want to disrupt that as much as possible, especially right now when so much is up in the air. So I think also we know if you work in brand marketing and strategy for that, you know that this stuff is ephemeral, right? Like what, James, you know better than anyone, right?
Yeah.
Like how much mileage do you get out of this from a news cycle point of view, right? Like it's...
Well, the thing is, I think most people don't understand the nature of a news cycle.
Yeah.
And I think it's different in every use case. Yeah. So when we talk about Nutella in a minute, that'll be different. When we talk about McDonald's, that'll be different. Yeah. But in this case, what's the story? Well, there's a number of elements to it. I mean, the story is firstly that there's been this massive theft.
Right.
It's happened to a big international company. Right. It's happened in conjunction with F1. It's blah, 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 blah. There are these different areas to look at. But then the thing that people forget about the news cycle is that the news cycle for this story does not operate in isolation. It operates alongside everything else that is going on in the world. Now, I have to be honest with you, before you mentioned this to me, I hadn't seen this story.
You hadn't?
No. Now, the reason for that is there's a number of reasons, right?
I think there's one very wriggly reason.
Squidgy, beautiful, cute reason. Yeah. But that's actually the point. The news has been pretty much taken up recently with what's going on in the Middle East, okay? So if you actually think about the other stories that have happened, there's nothing really standing out, okay? No. You've got the Scott Mills stuff on Radio 1. If you're in the UK, you'll have seen that.
If you're part of the BBC as well. I mean, I almost missed that.
There's a couple of other bits, but there's not been, I don't think, anything that's really stood out. It's all been Middle East stuff. So with this story, I hadn't seen it because I wasn't involved in the news cycle day to day. And because it wasn't on the front page of the website when I was looking, or I haven't heard it on a radio bulletin.
Yeah.
I have not been across it at all. Then how that affects the news cycle of the story, I think, is really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you have, depending on not only the story and the other stories that are going on, but depending on the medium through which you're delivering it, the news cycle length is different. So if I was writing radio bulletins, for example, even though we know that people only listen for 20 minutes at any time to a radio program, we also kind of want to keep changing it so that when they do come back to it, it sounds fresh and it sounds different and interesting. So radio bulletins, you try not to play the same clip more than once, certainly not more than twice. And that's when it's really quiet. And also you're trying to change stories as they come in and go out. So let's say, for example, this story broke at 6 o'clock in the morning. I would think you might get it. Let's say you have a clip or two, maybe. It's probably done by 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the latest. So you're constantly trying to redo that. Whereas on the website, and I haven't worked on the BBC website, so to be clear, but obviously stories have a much longer shelf life. You know, if it's a really good story and people are reading it, which I'm assuming they will have done with this, therefore it can stay up for a bit longer. They will still try to change things around, but as long as it's still getting clicks, it's there for people to see for longer, if that makes sense. And so you're less bothered about people needing to find the new thing on it. You might reversion stuff. You've got things like live pages and stuff if it's a breaking story. But, you know, stuff just lasts longer. Same with television news, right? A story that happens at 6 in the morning, you might still put on the 10 o'clock news that night if it's significant enough, because you've only got a set number of bulletins during the day. You've only got breakfast news, you've got the 1 o'clock news, the 6 o'clock news, the 10 o'clock news. So depending on how significant it is, it might last through the day.
Yeah. And what is significant if you're working on radio, if you're working on TV?
Significance depends, again, on the context of everything else that's happening.
Yeah.
So for a story like this, let's assume it's a Sunday and nothing else has happened during that day.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact, I mean, it's not a lead story, but it might be a lead story first thing in the morning if there's literally nothing else happening in the world. But by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, you'll have had all the political programs, which will have generated some lines for you. So those will go above this story, probably, because there'll be something that's a bit more relevant and a bit more local. Because here, for example, you're talking about a story which has got, you know, which is in Italy.
Yeah.
It's not about sport, it's about theft, but it's kind of,
The Athletic ran a story about it.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Because F1.
But yeah. So their way of determining whether this is a news story or a sports story is different to the way I would do it.
Yeah.
So I work at 5 Live quite a lot, Radio 5 Live, so I was reading the news for them the other week. What I would do is whenever we had a story that was close to being a sports story like this, we'd have a conversation with the sports desk. Is this one for you or is it one for me? Now, this one, I would say, is a theft. It is definitely a news story.
Yeah.
There are other stories which are very close to being a coin flip. So let's say there is a story about a financial problem in football.
Right.
To pick something off the top of my head.
Sheffield Wednesday collapse.
Sheffield Wednesday collapse, right. Is that a news story or a sports story?
Ooh. Both.
Right.
Yes.
That's the answer, right? That's the answer.
So business is news, right? Business is news. It's not like separate from that.
It's a fag paper.
But it's like boring
distinction,
news,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are all firewalls. So it's just working out what works best for your program that day. So this story I hadn't seen. It's interesting. My personal thought is it would get, on a national news bulletin, if there's nothing happening, it would get a couple of mentions and that'd be it.
So I did hear a mention of it on a BBC News bulletin on Radio 3, which I just have running in the background because the world's collapsing.
I love Radio 3.
Do you want to hear how my approach to news lately this year?
Yes, please do.
I've been trying to be more conscious about it in the last week, but this entire year, most of my news consumption has actually been through Radio 3 news bulletins. And the reason is because I found the news apps just so overwhelming that I switched off all the alerts and I started to do this thing where I would open a news app in the morning, usually the BBC, sometimes the New York Times. I use the FT edit and that's much less distressing, but one of those apps would get open once in the morning. I will scream for a full 5 seconds while I scroll very quickly, close it down, and it's Radio 3 all day. And then that's it.
I think that is the most sane decision you can make. And as somebody who works in the news, I actively encourage people not to look at the news.
Yeah. Well, the reason that I was asking about the Kit Kat thing particularly, because I did hear it on a Radio 3 bulletin. Now, like where it then got covered or got picked up through social media, or at least in my feeds, you know, part of it is because I'm in the echo chamber of brand and marketing, right? So I do get a lot of coverage of that, of people just, you know, very excited about the way that different brands were reacting to it. And then that seemed to be a news story, but it's not really a news story on the BBC. And I think this is also partly a BBC thing. You know, when you work on brands, we've talked about this before, like the greatest success that you have is when your brand gets picked up by the BBC, it becomes a story on the website, or, you know, heaven forfend, on the news. So I worked in Yo Valley many years ago when the Yo Valley ad campaign made in BBC News, you know, that's money can't buy, because BBC does not talk about brands and campaigns and marketing if it can avoid it, because it's commercial and they're public service broadcaster, right? So, but for other...
and also, as part of that, I mean, actually, the reason for it is not because it's a brand, it's because... Yes, okay, the BBC does have to be impartial. It's not seen to promote something. But basically, our question is, or my question is always, what's the news value of this? Yeah. And what does this mean for the audience? So, as I said at the start, it doesn't matter that it's Kit Kat or dairy milk. Actually, no, a huge amount of chocolate has gone missing. As you mentioned, product safety is definitely a story. That's part of it. I do not care which brand does what. The brand is largely, not entirely, but largely a byproduct of the news story. Yeah. From my perspective.
But for like, you know, when I was researching the story today, again, you know, I was just overwhelmed by the amount of organizations, including the New York Times, right, who covered the marketing response to this from other brands. Like that was a news story in itself, because so many brands and so many people, this seemed to spark imaginations, right? It took off. And so when I was talking about, well, could another chocolate brand do it? Actually, probably only a couple, because it has to be something so well known and that people like so much, and it's such, and everyone understands. There's actually only a handful of brands that can really do that. But the fact that that the response became a news story for some outlets, at least, I think particularly in the US, you know, that speaks to the difference between something like the BBC, which thinks about the public service aspect of it and the public information value of that, versus a commercially run media organization that is trying to think about what's going to interest people and generate clicks. And I think part of the reason there was such a big response on social media, not just from brands, but from other people, is because clearly there's some money in the eyeballs, right?
Yes, the BBC is obsessed with clicks.
Oh, they're also obsessed with. I mean, that's good to hear, but that equation sounds different to me when you talk about it, right?
It's different only in terms of, I would say, I don't care what the brand is. I only care about the relevance of the brand to the audience. Therefore, this becomes a better story because people know what Kit Kat is. You know, so therefore that's interesting. Yeah. But then the bits I'm interested in as a journalist are the public safety bits, are the fact it's a big heist, it's Italian mafia, blah, blah. That, for me, that's a bit that's interesting, which brings us on to the Nutella stuff, because that's, I think, interesting as well, in that this shouldn't, and I have no idea whether it has been, this is not a story that should be on the BBC at all, as far as I
don't think it's on the BBC at all. So I think this is where you're right to point out this distinction, right? But it is on a lot of other news organizations' websites, and they found lots of different ways to get into it, partially because they know that it's going to get... The BBC being obsessed with clicks is different from the BBC making all its money from clicks, right?
Yes, exactly. And we should say this is about a jar of Nutella emerging from the space station thingy,
on the space station. It's on Artemis 2. So... yeah. The interesting thing about that is not just that jar of Nutella was floating through the cabin, perfect angle, complete serendipity for Nutella, right? Like, congratulations, Nutella. But I've been going through a kick over the last few months where I just read and watch, listen to and play a lot of space stuff. I've been playing Starfield. Project Hail Mary is my feel-good film of the year. Go see it if you haven't seen it. You know, I saw Interstellar at IMAX. I read Orbital. I'm now reading the Project Hail Mary audiobook. So I've learned a little bit about space just through fiction. And nothing gets on a spaceship that isn't worth its weight in something, right? Like this is a personal item that they chose to bring on. and at the expense of something else. Like they have to rewear their underwear. There isn't enough room for multiple clean pairs of underwear. They have a jar of Nutella on the spaceship.
Priorities. Eh?
Priorities. It keeps them happy, you know? I think the amount of coverage it's gotten is absurd. I really do. Yeah. I think everyone giving plaudits to Nutella, I'm like, they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything, right? Except, and there's a lot to be said for this, making an exceptional product that is very hard to replicate, paying very close attention to what we would call their brand fundamentals and their marketing over many, many years. They do not have exciting advertising. They are not very good at that. In fact, they're terrible. I'm going to put it out there. I think their advertising is, from like a conceptual or from a creative point of view, isn't the best, but their product is great. Their marketing of the product is great. The way they distribute it, the way they make it appear on the shelves, how they think about their collaborations and those opportunities, the fact they pay such close attention to making sure that things like the colors and the font and everything is right and identifiable. Perfect. And that's how you get Nutella on a spaceship. That isn't free. So everyone going around going, congratulations, Nutella, free advertising, couldn't have planned it better. Like that's not free. It's like, that's worth money we can't imagine.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You don't get free unless you pay millions of pounds for it first in some other way.
But do you not think then that there's a lesson in this for brands that quality is important in some cases?
Oh, massively. You don't get on a spaceship unless you have a very good product. Quality is everything. Nutella is a very high quality product.
Because we hear so much from people like Cory Doctorow, who I really like, who's talked a lot about enshittification of products and enshittification of everything, frankly, which seems to be the case. There seems to be this rush to the bottom. In that case, is it true that companies who actually try to hold the line on quality will get a benefit from it?
Yes, but I think I will caveat this with, I think it's easier for food in the sense that you have control over the inputs, and basically what you're then looking at is, do you make it smaller or do you make it cost a bit more? But the amount of money you're playing with there is not as much as, say, for a tech company, like the cost of inputs into a tech product. So when Cory Doctorow talks about enshittification, he's talking about tech products, right? Like, how do you make them remain free or as low cost as possible to people? That has been a problem. You know, you can't really do that with food. But if you have a good product with food, if you maintain that quality, if you get the balance right between price and product, you're good. You're good. Just focus on the fundamentals.
So let's go from upside to downside. Why are burger CEOs eating burgers back?
Oh my God.
I don't, again, right, this is another one of those stories that I've kind of missed, but I've seen very awkward looking people trying to eat burgers badly, and I don't really understand what on earth it's all about.
Okay.
I mean, that could apply to most of the world at the moment, but never mind.
So the CEO of McDonald's, Chris Kempczinski, is the CEO of McDonald's in the US. He, a couple months ago, made a video for Instagram where he is taste testing a new burger that they brought out called the Big Arch. Now, there were so many funny things in this video. I'm also going to caveat this by saying that, about 10 years ago or more, I worked on McDonald's for a period of time in the UK. I worked with one of their ad agencies on the McDonald's account. I think they're a great company. They do care very much about their product, I think, especially in the UK. If you want to ensure that your product is incredibly well sourced and they can nail it down to the single farm it came from, I would highly recommend McDonald's for that, because they know where everything comes from. They care very deeply about that consistency and that quality because that's their entire brand value. However, as an organization, they definitely have some quirks, and those came out in this video. So one is the way that the CEO was presented, right? This is a very buttoned down, precise man.
Yes.
He is very contained as a person. And I've now watched multiple interviews with him. That man does not move. When he takes a bite of this burger, it is the smallest bite you will ever see. I don't even know if it qualifies as a bite.
I mean, he did look as though he'd never looked at, seen a burger, had any concept of how to eat anything in his life.
So I think this is partially a reflection of what happens when your organization is so siloed from the rest of the world and you develop these ways of working. It's very conducive to having a very consistent, high-performing organization. It is not consistent to marketing to people who are outside of that organization. And, McDonald's, when you work on it, you do have to taste test burgers at 9 a.m. There are buckets because you can't eat that much, right? Like, and often it's not the right time of day to test something. And that's part of the culture. So it'll, what he was doing when I saw him take a bite, I'm like, oh, you really are taste testing this burger the way that you've been trained to taste test this burger, right? And when you work for McDonald's, you work for them for years and years, you develop this habit of how you try things. The same with any, big restaurant chain. Starbucks, I worked as a barista at Starbucks at uni. Everyone who worked at Starbucks taste tests coffee the same way. You take a sip, you spit it out. It's, it's part of the process. Now, like, the fact that nobody coached him on how to be human. And I don't mean he's not human, because he seems like a very, very, very nice person. I watched a few interviews with him. He seems very, very nice. Definitely someone you'd want as a neighbor. Definitely someone you want at the helm of the world's biggest fast food company. Definitely someone you want stewarding a brand. Definitely you want someone thinking about this thing. He's not the person you want to have a burger with.
Why on earth did this video get made?
It's a good question. I have theories.
Please tell me your theories, because I have no idea.
So McDonald's has very good corporate communications teams working on it, and very good corporate communications agencies working. In fact, all of their agencies for communications are excellent, right? So in the US, Wieden and Kennedy is their ad agency. I think they're also their global ad agency. They do exceptional work. Every touch point, every communications arm has like the best people in the world working on it. However, they don't always know all the aspects of it, right? And you do get lots of blurred lines happening. So corporate communications will be dealing with the C-suite, with the senior management, with, how McDonald's as a business talks to Wall Street or talks to the city. They will also probably be in charge of LinkedIn. To me, this feels a bit like a corporate communications presentation about how CEOs are really important brand ambassadors. And it's important that the CEO becomes an engaging figure on LinkedIn and shows that they have full faith in the brand, that they eat the product. The product being one of the really funny things about this video.
I'm just staggered that nobody went, this just looks weird. Why are we doing this?
So sometimes do
you think there was an intern somewhere going, what is this all about? And who wasn't empowered enough to go, I'm really sorry, this is just weird. We can't do
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, part of it as well is when clients like McDonald's are also really big clients, right? Like your retail clients are huge clients, and you don't want to necessarily cross them. Your teams especially your account handling teams, they get trained in how to talk to the client and how to speak their language. And often that can end up in a place where you're all talking to each other and there's no outside input. Now, one of the benefits of having creative strategists or just new people coming onto stuff is that they're the ones who put their hands up and say, this is kind of nonsense. This is silly. Why are we doing this? Sometimes that doesn't go down very well. And so those people get shielded from the client. So I suspect that's kind of what happened here. Is this was in theory a good idea, but when it came to the practice of dealing with the CEO, there was nobody around willing to say, hey, we got to get you some training on how to be a human, because there's humans on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is now it is probably the last social media, right? Yeah. As close to it as it gets. And it's dying quickly, but that's, it's last thing. And if you're social, you gotta be a social human. And I don't think that's him. And he basically said the same thing in a Wall Street Journal interview I watched today. He gets it. This is a very sensible man. He does understand marketing. He understands their consumers and their customers extremely well. He's just not the messenger.
And from a news point of view, again, I mean, it's interesting because I can see it's one of those things where I can see it becoming a really big story across meme culture, across Reddit, etc., etc. I can also see it being a big story for the business news sites and papers. I'm sure if I was doing my old job at the World Service business desk, I would have been interested in doing something about it. Yeah. And the angle would have been, is corporate America completely devolved from the rest of humanity, etc., etc.? Or you'd go down the where does marketing go bad kind of angle.
Which is kind of what happened.
Apart from that, it's just frivolous. Unless it has an effect on share prices, unless it has an effect on how the company is perceived more widely, or if there's something more tangible to it, it becomes a story for me. Yeah. But again, I think that's a good example of, when you're looking at how the media reacts to things, you have to consider context in everything. You know, it depends which program I'm working on that day as to whether or not that's a story for me. If I'm working on 5 Live, it might be a funny throwaway. Did you see that guy eating a burger? Wasn't that hilarious? Let's talk to a company director of a fast food firm who says it was ludicrous. He'd never do anything like that. Whereas if I'm working on the business desk on the World Service, I'd be going, what does this mean for corporate America? What does this mean for McDonald's culture? How damaging could this be to their brand value? Blah, blah, blah. So that's the thing with the media. I don't think there is a particular, this is definitely going to happen with every news story. There is very much a context is king with everything. I
think you're right. I think this was probably a bad tactical decision that they then rescued. I think that, McDonald's definitely didn't plan this. They don't want this. They never want this. But the way that they handled it and what they were able to get from it and take their case to Wall Street and say, actually, we're trying to make these changes. We're trying to address these perceptions. We understand what people are feeling. This is how we're trying to show it. And yes, we're real people, even if I look like a square person who doesn't move very much.
It's interesting to see how these 3 different food brands have all dealt with a story in slightly different, interesting ways and the perception that it has on their companies. And as you know, I'm a cynical person. Yeah. I don't think advertising really has any effect on me, but I am going to go now buy a Big Mac, cover it in Nutella and stick a Kit Kat in the middle.
But you hate Nutella. Don't change who you are, James.
I hate all 3 of those. It's not the point. I like Kit Kats.
James, you went to York.
Yes.
The home of Kit Kat.
The home
my
of Kit
my
Kat.
master's scholarship was paid for by the Roundtree Foundation.
Was it really?
Yeah.
There you go. That's good information. I didn't know that. What did they pay you in? Money or Kit Kats?
Neither.
Neither. Sadly,
neither.
Claire, thank you very much. Please tell us the email address because I forget it every time.
It is hello@canwehaveyyourattention.com.
We will be back in a fortnight's time. We have loads of really interesting things lined up for you over the next few weeks. We definitely should talk about social media and where that's going at the moment. What other things have we got in the pipeline? Because there's about 5 others. Have you got?
Yes. So we have Russian information operations, which will be fun.
Yes.
We have a discussion with an intelligence analyst or former intelligence analyst on how to sort through masses of information and make decisions. We've got a discussion again on misinformation, disinformation operations as well, but from a slightly different angle.
And I really need to get that computer games episode over there.
We need to get that. We need to get that set up.
So anyway, lots to come. Please get in touch with us. Lovely to hear from you through the email. That's great. Or you can contact us, either of us, on the slowly dying social network, LinkedIn.
There's a Substack, but the email is actually probably best because we all know these out. I didn't tell. Yeah, we need to do an episode on the algorithms and suppression.
Yes.
I've got a guest in mind for that. I don't know if she'll say yes, but she might too, and I think she's very entertaining.
Okay, good. Well, all that to come. Yeah. And we'll be back with you in